Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to be doing something a little different, as I'll be building this Airfix 132 scale frontier checkpoint. The reason behind this is I've collected a lot of terrain kits, which I plan to use in my future animations, and originally I was just going to build these off camera as and when I needed them. But I thought it'd be good to see if people were interested in watching me build scenery, as opposed to just building post-apocalyptic cars. So that's what I'm making this video for. If people enjoy the video, then I'll make them in between making the cars. If not, then I'll stick to cars. Anyhow. So first, let's see what's in the box. So we have the instructions, the parts sprues all nicely bagged up. Not many pieces to this kit, and seemingly not much flashing. Now if you don't know what flashing is, usually it's just little lines that go around the outside, like mold lines and such, but if it's a bit more than that, then it's usually referred to as flashing. Personally, it doesn't really bother me. You've got to do a bit of cleanup work with any model kit anyway. Inside the instructions, we have some decals and a flyer for the Airfix Model Club. The instructions themselves are fairly simple and easy to follow. There's a nice little simple diagram showing the painting guide on the back. Since this is just a simple kit with fairly large pieces, I'm just going to clip all the parts off the sprue just to make it easier to build. And then I'm going to take my hobby knife and clean off the mold lines and flashing just by dragging it across the edge like so. I'm going to do the rest of the parts off camera just to save 20 to 30 minutes of cleanup work, which I just don't think needs to be put into the video. So the first thing I'm going to build is the searchlight for the guard tower. So the only thing I need to do here is glue the lens to the body of the light. The rest of it will click together, which I'm going to leave so I can paint it separately, as well as be able to move it around in future animations. Onto the actual tower base, which goes together quite easily, like so. Following this, I glue on the platform and the roof. So next onto the walls, which uses this pop and slide system which is a bit difficult on some of the walls where the tab kind of just bends, as you can see here. So I just remove this and then glue the walls in place, and some of them do work and some of them I have to remove the tab for, but either way it goes together relatively simple. The wall together now, I apply some glue to the tabs on the bottom and then glue this to the platform on the tower. I also just pop in the searchlight, which goes in here, as you can see by the hole. The ladder I'm going to leave loose just because when I go to install this it'll probably get broken off because there's not really much for it to glue to. As well as the fact that I could probably reuse the ladder in a few other animations where I don't need the tower and such. Next is the sentry house, which is where a guy would take shelter from the weather, and this is just quite simple, just have to glue the back on and it's done. Next is the bridge, which is almost as simple, where I just need to glue the walls on using these tabs. So I apply glue, so I just apply some glue to the tabs and then slot them in place. The next thing to build is the checkpoint barrier, which goes together like so. So although this is a fairly simple kit, I have made a few mistakes personally, and we'll go through these. Firstly, I built this as a model kit, not the fact that I'm going to use this as a prop, and obviously I've glued the roof on, not thinking about having to animate figures inside of the tower, so I have to rip that roof off, and then I just cut some pieces of styrene and glued these over the connection points on the roof. This is so I can easily take the roof on and off without it being permanently attached, and therefore I can have my hands in and manoeuvre the figures, hence when I'm animating and such. So unfortunately I built the checkpoint barrier backwards. As you can see, this is the way it should be, but it's facing the opposite direction. I could pull this apart, but by the time I realised this, the glue had kind of hardened in certain places, and so there was more of a risk of damaging it. And so in the end I can just flip it round and it doesn't really make much difference. It just means I need to remember to put the sentry house on the opposite side of where the barrier is hinged. when I'm animating with this and such. So onto the painting, and I start with a guard tower using some Revell Wood Brown, and then use some Revell Grey to paint the walls. Following this, I attempt to paint the camo pattern as the instructions show with some Revell Olive Green. For the body of the searchlight, I use some Revell Metallic Steel, which I also use on the brackets I built for the roof. Back to the searchlight, I use some Revell Matte White to paint the lens. I then use some Revell Leather Brown to paint all the little straps holding the tower together. Moving on to the bridge, I use some Revell Tank Grey to paint the road tiles, followed by using some sandy yellow for the walls. I then apply a coat of Revell Matte Black to the underside of the bridge to hide all the structure underneath. You won't really see much under here, but it's just better for it to be painted black than it to be standing out as grey, just in case you catch it at the right angle. I also dry brush some Revell Matte Black onto all the holes and damage sections of the bridge to make it look more like battle damage from bombs and artillery. For the sentry house, I started out with a base coat of Revell Matte White, and then used some masking tape to stencil out the pattern, and then use some Revell Fiery Red and Olive Green to paint the pattern. And then use some Revell Matte Black to paint the roof. And then finally use some Revell Matte Grey to paint the interior. For the sign, I use some Revell Wood Brown. And then for the barrier, I use some Revell Metallic Steel for the metal parts, some Revell Fiery Red and White to paint the stripes, as well as some Revell Matte Black at the end. Next, I used some decal solution and applied it to where I was going to apply the decal, and then cut out the decals and soak them in some warm water until they become free from the backing paper. And then I applied these over the top of where I'd already applied the decal solution, and then applied a bit more decal solution on top of that. This is so it would bond better to the model. And I also did this for the barrier off camera. And then, like usual, I applied a nice black wash over the top of everything, just to kind of pick out the details and make it look a bit more dirt and grimy and blend everything together. And here's the final build. Now, it's a bit too big to show it all together, so I'm just going to show it in sections, starting with the guard tower. So I ended up repainting the camo section on this. I repainted it to make it look a little bit more uniform, as it was kind of all over the place the first time I did it. Moving on to the bridge, initially I didn't like how the black wash kind of turned out, so I reapplied it, during which I realised the top layer of stones and the stones across the archway were actually grey on the box art, so I reapplied. So I painted them accordingly, using some Revell Stone Grey. I also did try and apply the black wash to the road tiles, but for some reason it just never turned. For some reason it just never seemed to turn out right, and so in the end I just kind of reapplied the tank grey and left it as is. I also filled the end caps on the inner walls because I'd found some leftover brick pattern styrene. It doesn't quite match up, but it looks a lot better than it did before when it just had a big empty void there. Lastly, we have the checkpoint and sentry box. Now, I have no idea why the sentry box is painted in this particular camo pattern. From what I looked up on the internet, it's usually painted the national colours of where they're stationed. I would take a guess that it's more just to make it stand out, a bit like a bus stop, so you know it's there to take shelter, as well as if there's a vehicle or something, they know that it's likely going to be a person there, so if they've lost control to swerve away from it or something like that. But again, I couldn't really find out much why as they paint them in these kind of bright colours. You would think it'd be more camo, but you know, that's what I could find out. Overall, I think the entire kit was fairly simple to go together, and I'm looking forward to using the whole thing, as well as certain parts of it in different animations in the future. As usual, stick around for the glamour shots, as well as a little animation I've made with this. I hope you've all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.